Let's turn this into this. So this sample was inspired by Leon Thomas and Tommy Richmond. I've been listening to Leon Thomas's new album and I really love it right now. So this sample's very soulful, very R&B influenced, and the switch up part of the sample has got that 80s funk soul thing going on. And in this one I'm spilling so much sauce, so you want to stick around to the end to catch everything. We're turning these two chords into something very, very special, and we're only using 3 melodic sounds for the A section and a bass, and then adding some percussion. So the one chord in A minor is some kind of A minor chord. Here we have a basic A minor triad, just A, C and E. If we add this note here, the G, it becomes an A minor 7th, which is a nice sounding chord. We take this note, we drop it an octave, and we have a different inversion of an A minor 7th chord. I repeated this chord for 4 bars, and then I brought in the 4 chord, which in A minor is a D minor chord. And all I've done is played a simple D minor triad. Again, I've added the C to make it a D minor 7th, but if I drop that C an octave, listen to how the chords sound one after another. What tends to work really well in music, and you don't even need to know music theory for this, but you can see that these notes are miles apart from each other. So if I were to take these 2 notes and drop them down here, these notes are playing in similar places on the keyboard. Now listen to how fluid they sound. All we're doing is we're changing the voicings of the chord to fit better next to each other. This sounds a lot better than it did originally, and also it sounds more like how an actual keyboard player or composer would play these particular chords. I added one more chord in the A section, a passing chord that gives us tension and wants to resolve back to our A minor chord, A flat diminished chord. We can put this diminished chord before either the 1 or the 4 in a minor 1/4 progression. All we need to do to build it is to take a root note, a semitone underneath our target chord being A minor, skip 2 notes, draw a note in, skip 2 notes, draw a note in, A flat diminished 7th chord, we add this note. If we don't want the 7th chord, we can mute this note out. Gives us a little tension and also gives us a little bit of spice that you're going to hear in tons of R&B music. If we add the 7th, the cool thing about diminished chords is that there are only actually 3 diminished chords that exist, because you can flip these notes around, and because they're equally spaced apart, they'll just make another diminished chord. So the reason that I only had 3 melodic sounds in the A section is because I use MultiKeys again, which if you saw my last video, you'll know that this is a crazy, crazy way of creating samples. So guys, if you're getting something out of this, go follow me on Instagram, handles here, and go cop some of my free mini kits. You've got bass midis, stems are in there, and I'm going to be releasing loads more kits soon. Probably put this very sample in my next kit. I went into Pigments and I dropped in a couple of samples from my boy Louis' kit. If you don't know his stuff, check him out, he's fire. And I had the voice of Scott Storch ringing in my head, him, where he said all his huge hits were made up of call and response, which means he would play something, i.e. a chord or a stab, like a and then up there'd be some kind of response. And Nami said this as well about making great samples, that essentially you're creating a conversation within the sample itself. So this call and response is super important and really interesting, and I just utilized this in the A section. Processing wise, I didn't put much on this. I put a little RC20, EQ'd a little bit of the bottom out, and I used the Arturia Rev reverb, which I love as well, which just has a nice vintage texture to it. The cool thing about these multi-keys, it almost reminds me of Playbox by Contact, but I never really got too into that. Honestly, this sound makes up the bulk of the sample. Underneath this, quite low, I wanted to add some piano, and I just did that with a Lab Soft piano. I know this used to be free, but now you have to subscribe, but any piano will do. And I just played some tinkly little, almost like fills in the background. Because I'm in A minor, you can get away with just tapping around on the white keys until you find stuff that seems to work. And I just added a few sprinkles, panned it one side. I added some nice plugins on this piano. I added the texture plugin, which I really like, from Devious Machines, which just adds an extra little bit of noise under each key press. I added some RC20, as usual, Valhalla Vintage Verb, a little shaper box, which is just doing some light side chaining, and some Portal, where I'm on the preset called Time Traveler. My bass here was pretty much just root notes. I wanted to keep it simple. I just accented all of the different changes and used a few little pentatonic fill notes just to add a bit more interest and realism to the bass. Again, I used my Scarby Rickenbacker for this section. I wanted one more sound to just accent the pigment sound, but I wanted something that gave a little bit more attack. So I chose a Pluck in the Sky Keys. Didn't put any processing at all on there, not even EQ'd it. I just balanced it off. Mixing and gain staging is super important as well. So that's a good takeaway here, that if you just balance stuff off, people always want to go, oh, I need 10 million plugins, I need this, that, and the other on this. But actually, a lot of the time, just turning things up and down will do massive things for your sounds. I added some really simple percussion here from Monty Booker's kit. Just a couple of taps with a little bit of processing on. And then, as my boy Reggie said, add some texture, ambience in the background, very low. So I just added some tape hiss to make this sound a little bit more vintage. I used a free plugin on the percussion called Delay. Really dope plugin. Check it out if you haven't already. Go cop that. One more thing I want to highlight is just a nice chromatic walk down, which adds some variation to the sample. Halfway through bar 6, all I'm doing is I'm anticipating the D minor 7th at bar 7. We're playing an E minor 7th, and then an E flat minor 7th, and then the D minor 7th. And you can hear him playing a little melody dee on top. And these melodies I just sing in my head, and I just added it on a different sound. I've been listening to a lot of Tommy Richmond and Brent Faiyaz, and I wanted to bring in some of that 80s funk, but still keep it modern as well. I kept in the same key, but I changed the rhythm from that choppy call and response to a couple of different chords. I just went for a 5/6, 4. Immediately I got 80s in my head. Again, I kept it simple. I didn't use many sounds. I used the same pigment sound as my bassist, and I just played those chords in on that rhythm. I doubled the same MIDI on an EP sound, just using Logic's stock electric piano. But processing wise, I copied the processing from the Labs piano from earlier. I added some piano fills, which just da 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 da, like that, on a nice counter rhythm. I used the same piano sound as in the A section for this. To add a little bit more weight to the sample, I went for the August flute preset in Sky Keys and just doubled the MIDI, but dropped it a whole octave down and then lowered it in the mix. I love this squelchy bass sound. Here are my settings in Omnisphere. Go copy them if you want. I also had this falling, descending line that I had in my head that I wanted to contrast the rhythm of the chords with, and you can hear it falling. A lot of the time I program these in slowly, then I time stretch them to be quicker. I literally think I just ran my hands down the keyboard for this one. I used the Pay Attention lead sound in Sky Keys. I went for a simple little drum beat that I just pulled out of the Apple loops and put a couple of effects on, just filtered it down. I didn't really want a full drum track here. Remember, this is a sample, so I wanted to leave space for a producer to come and add their sauce. And then the icing on the cake was just this little vocal that I dragged in from Splice, and I added this processing to make it unintelligible, but give that feeling that I just ripped this from an 80s Prince record or something very similar. And on the master bus, just put a little bit of limiting, a sound shifter to change the pitch, and a tape plugin that I just like the look of. Don't really know if it does anything. And if you've got something out of this video, go check this one out to learn a little bit more theory and more production source.